Loose Leash Walking Part 2, Taming Dizzy. This video will chronicle the adventures of teaching Dizzy to walk on a loose leash. Dizzy has the reputation for being quite crazy, as she demonstrates here. This excitement was triggered by the owner picking up a leash. Let's see how Dizzy walks. The owner actually does a good job here of teaching Dizzy to sit by the door. But as you can see, sitting by the door really has no bearing on how well the rest of the walk goes. Dizzy has been pulling her owners like this for 7 years. Is it actually possible to teach her to walk politely? Since this was a pretty tall task, I had to do some hardcore preparation. To get myself ready, I got introspective. Put on a bandana. Did some stretching. So how do you teach a dog to walk politely? There are as many different methods as there are opinions, but in reward-based training, it can basically be broken down into 3 concepts. First is the red light, green light method, where if the dog is walking on a loose leash, she moves forward. If the leash goes tight, then she stops. The idea is so that the dog learns a loose leash means she gets to go where she wants. In theory, this sounds good, but in reality, there are a lot of practical issues that make this method somewhat ineffective, especially for driven pullers. Then there is the 180-degree and negative yardage idea. In this method, if the dog pulls, then the human walks in the opposite direction. For dogs with a high-level pulling drive such as Dizzy, this method works much better than the red light, green light method. Now, a problem with this method is that you may tend to look crazy to outsiders. The most elegant method is using a completely non-coercive method to teach the dog to walk beside you, without using a leash. This is typically accomplished with clicker training and is taught in the backyard first and then phased into more distracting environments. The main drawback to this method is that a lot of treats may be required. There are many variants to these methods. I will essentially be using method 2 and variants of method 3 on Dizzy. I teach loose leash walking by providing the dog clear instructions on where to walk, which is beside or behind me. If the dog ventures away from this area, I immediately do a 180 and we try again. This is me doing a bunch of 180s. I basically did this for half an hour or so. I never lost patience because I knew that as long as I was doing my part right, the laws of learning would take care of things for me. Pay attention to my timing. As with all training, timing is crucial to how fast the dog learns. If I allow the dog to walk a couple of steps on a tight leash before I react, then I'm not doing anything about the pulling/lunging behavior. I must provide the appropriate consequence at precisely the right moment in order for the dog to learn. The window of opportunity to address the unwanted behavior is right as or right before the dog lunges forward. The key is to react to the dog, not the leash. If you wait for the leash to go tight before reacting, you are too late. Slowly we're seeing progress as I'm able to start taking more and more steps. I should make a note on training equipment. In this video, I'm using a typical buckle collar since that's what the owner had. I prefer to use the Premier Easy Walk harness as it takes pressure away from the sensitive neck area. I find that buckle collars are typically very difficult to do leash training on because they trigger opposition reflex so easily. As for myself, the bandana is an important piece of equipment to keep my long hair under control. A hat is also a suitable solution. At this point, it is probably an hour or so into the training session. Clearly, a lot of progress has been made. Even though this looks great, understand that Dizzy is not cured of pulling. This demonstration just shows what is possible. If no further training is done, this session will just be a blade of grass in a field of weeds. Walking with Dizzy, away we go, yeah!